The Gilded Age was a period from 1870 to 1910. America's industrial economy exploded, generating unprecedented opportunities for individuals to build great fortunes, but also leaving many farmers and workers struggling merely for survival. The growth in the economy and the industry supported materialism and political corruption.
In the Gilded Age, politics were corrupted by politicians who took bribes and gave high-power government jobs to their supporters. Most elections were controlled by powerful political machines.
This system was called the spoils system. In this system, a newly elected official gave jobs to his friends, relatives, and political supporters. Nepotism, defined as giving jobs to one's relatives, combined with patronage, the act of giving jobs in payment for political favors, sapped the vitality of government.
Hello, young pupils. Another step to mend the corrupt government was the creation of the Pendleton Act. The Pendleton Act was designed to promote merit as the primary criteria in hiring and promoting within the federal workforce. This act divided employees into two categories. Those two categories were classified and unclassified. The Pendleton Act also created a civil service commission to oversee the examination system used to determine the merit of classified candidates. Employees in the classified system, which only included about 10% of federal employees, were also protected from being demoted or dismissed for political reasons and can no longer be required to make political contributions.
The Pendleton Act transformed the nature of the public service. Today, many well-educated and well-trained professionals have found a rewarding career in the federal service. When the Pendleton Act went into effect, only 10% of the government's 132,000 employees were educated. Today, more than 90% of the 2.7 million federal employees are educated.
A political machine is a party organization that entices people to vote for a party by offering rewards in exchange for loyalty and service. Political machines, which dominated large cities until the 1930s, tempted voters with such benefits as jobs, citizenship applications, housing, and emergency relief.
Political machines received excessive power by using the good old boy system. This system gives special treatment, especially in business, to members of the machine. Others gain their power by mobilizing large blocks of voters to influence candidates, elections, and local political parties.
After the machines gained considerable power, the leaders, usually called bosses, were elected to office mainly because of the support of the machines. Eventually, political machines integrated in city government. This new political system, in which the official government was supported and manipulated by a shadow government of bosses and associations, became known as machine politics for its ability to call out the votes like a machine to sponsor any political agenda.
These associations provided vital services to people who had no other resources. But because the shadow government operated outside the public eye, political leaders took opportunities that led to a demoralized government.
The most infamous political machine was Tammany Hall. Tammany Hall was the name given to the Democratic political machine that dominated New York politics from the mayoral victory of Fernando Wood in 1854 through the election of Fiorella LaGuardia in 1934. The 80-year period between these two elections marks a time in which Tammany was the city's driving political force.
Throughout the early 19th century, Tammany continued to deepen its association with the Democratic Party, emerging as the controlling interest in New York City elections. Throughout the 1830s and 1840s, the society expanded its political control even further by earning the loyalty of the city's ever-expanding immigrant community, a task that was accomplished by helping newly arrived foreigners obtain jobs, a place to live, and even citizenship, so that they could vote for the Tammany candidates in city and state elections. This process marked the beginning of the political corruption taking place in New York City during the Gilded Age.
In political terms, a city boss is a person who applies their power over a particular region or constituency. Bosses may dictate voting patterns, control appointments, and wield considerable influence in other political processes. They do not necessarily hold public office themselves. In fact, most historical bosses did not hold public office, at least during the times of their greatest influence. William Boss Tweed holds a significant role in the Gilded Age because he was one of the most well-known city bosses.
Boss Tweed represented everything inimical about Irish immigrants without even being Irish. Tweed was in fact born in Manhattan, the son of a third-generation Scots Protestant. In 1852, he was elected a Democratic alderman in New York. A year later, he entered Congress. Then, in 1867, he was elected a state senator and stayed in power until 1871, when he was exposed for corruption.
By 1870, the Tweed ring, consisting of Boss Tweed, Commissioner of Public Works, Peter Sweeney, City Chamberlain, Richard Connolly, City Comptroller, A. Oakley, Mayor, and John T. Hoffman, Governor, had gained total control over the city's public institutions and municipal works, and were siphoning off staggering sums of money from the hundreds of city projects under their control. Much of the time this was done by the simple device of having contractors pay their bills and slip the overcharge back under the table. To pad an account means to seek business compensations for things that are not really business expenses. Tweed was collecting money to fund city projects, but having the expenses padded, giving him the ability to pocket the money raised.
The Tweed ring were outright thieves, and Tammany Hall had multiple scandals. An estimated $75 to $200 million were illegally taken from the city between the years 1865 and 1871. The symbol of this type of corruption for the public became the New York County Courthouse, renowned as Tweed's Courthouse. Begun in 1858, it was supposed to have cost $350,000. 12 years later, the cost had risen to $12 million and was still rising. When the accounts were uncovered, the extent of Tammany's corruption was revealed by the New York Times. In just one instance, 11 thermometers had been charged at $7,500 after Tweed's corruption had been exposed.
After the attack in Times and Harper's Weekly, Tweed quickly became the symbol of Tammany corruption. On December 15, 1871, Tweed was indicted on 3 counts of fraud. Trying to avoid a civil lawsuit, Tweed escaped prison and fled to Spain in the winter of 1871. He was recaptured by the Spanish police quickly because he was recognized from the political cartoons posted in Harper's Weekly. On April 12, 1878, he died of pneumonia in Liddell Street Jail, penniless and broken.
In 1932, Tammany Hall came to an end after corruption charges. After that, Carmen G. DeSpacio briefly revived Tammany Hall in the 1950s, but lost control of his district to Reformers' New York Committee for Democratic Voters, a group dedicated to enhancing the democratic process by opposing DeSpacio's reincarnated Tammany in 1961. Eventually, their efforts were successful, and in 1961, DeSpacio was removed from power. The once mighty Tammany political machine, now deprived of its leadership, quickly faded from political importance and by the mid-1960s had ceased to exist. The years 1870 to 1910 in America were the back end of a very corrupt political period in America. The political system was dominated by city bosses and the spoils system. The Pendleton Act of 1883 was able to prevent this corruption from blowing out of proportion, but the years before it was passed left its mark on political history. Right after the Civil War, America needed to unify. A key characteristic of a unified nation is having a strong unified central government.
With all of the political corruption going on with the people like Boss Tweed and the group at Tammany Hall, it is amazing that the country is where it is today. The Pendleton Act can be attributed to part of that success as it provided accountability in the political systems in America. The spoils system allowed for people with no credibility to be hired as government employees and new leaders of the country at a time when America needed good leadership the most.
The country was divided after the Civil War, and the South was very hesitant and resistant towards rejoining the Union. The political corruption caused furthered the turbulence in America. With America in dire need of political stability, the need for political reform was inevitable. It would have been almost impossible to reunite the country with people who had no political background and no political knowledge running the government. The corruption of the spoils system and city bosses in the years during and after the Civil War left the country with no choice but to reform its political methods if it were to unify the nation again.